to Flying Upstream. Today, we're joined by someone who has reinvented herself more times than most of us can count and still keeps going. Jennifer Jaxxon-Louis is a former math professor, current academic advisor, and now a published author of young adult sci fi thrillers. She's got 2 master's degrees, 9 books under her belt, and a purple streak in her hair, and an unwavering belief that you should never settle for a career that doesn't light you up inside.
After years of hard work, Jennifer published her debut novel. And trust us, it's got everything: AI, nanotechnology, human hunting games in the Midwest, and a whole lot of heart. Jennifer's here to share her wild ride, her deep resilience, and the lesson that no matter how old you are or how many times you've been knocked down, it's never too late to chase what lights you up. Jennifer, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Well, thank you. Such a great introduction already. I really appreciate it. So excited to be here with you both.
So let's just dive right in here. You've you've had a very colorful life so far. You've tried lots of different things, which I so appreciate that you're just kind of keep searching for the light, keep chasing it. What were 3 steps that you took towards not just bettering your life, but continuing to chase your passion?
Oh, such a good question. I'm kind of blessed and cursed with like way too many interests. It's kind of like a form of ADHD, I think, and it's just so hard to know where to focus. I always joke I should like clone myself because I've done so many things, but the first thing that really I did to like better my life is I gave up my position as a tenured professor. I was a math professor at the community college level. And I love the school I was at. It's not to knock the school. I was actually at 3 different colleges, but it's not anything about that. It's because the grading was so much. I don't believe in multiple choice as an educator. It goes against everything I believe as a math instructor. And it was taking over my life. And this is kind of a funny story, but like one of my favorite bands of all time is Guns N' Roses. Love them. And I have this like funny story. My whole life, I've been trying to see them in concert. And so one day, like my ex-husband's best friend surprised us with tickets to the concert, not knowing that I had 5 classes worth of exams to grade by noon the next day. And you cannot turn in grades late. So I went to the concert. I was maybe there a half hour. I don't even think I heard a word. I took a cab home and I graded those exams all night and I got them in because you can't screw students who are like having scholarships and all kinds of things because you didn't turn their grades like because you're at the Guns N' Roses concert. So I just I spent so much time and but the other thing is like I realized like I'm a really effective educator with 40 students. I'm a much better educator with one-on-one or one on a few. And so like I've tutored for over 30 years and I'm thinking of maybe, on the side, like starting up a tutoring business. I've, done a lot of things and, just trying that because I still love math. I love students. I love teaching, but being a professor and all of the responsibilities after 17 years, it just like was not for me. And, people don't realize how hard teachers work without pay for all the extra work they do above and beyond. And it's just, I'm kind of a perfectionist and wanted to do well by my students. But this kind of leads into the second thing. Like I came to realize of all my passions, I love architecture. I love dance, gymnastics, cheerleading. Those are my other main lifelong passions. Like writing is the main thing I always wanted to do from reading Nancy Drew on. I've always wanted to write a great mystery. And so I just realized like the teaching and all of the lesson planning and the grading was taking away from my time to do what I really feel is my purpose on this earth to do, which is to write. And so I had to give it up to really chase my passion. And I may never be a famous writer, but it's like I want to do it because it makes me happy. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I love that. What do you think is the main thing that you learned from that experience, from giving up, from giving up a career of 17 years of being a tenured professor and teaching, math, which a lot of people would be like, well, that sounds like you're pretty successful by all societal standards. What do you think you learned? What was the number one thing you learned?
Oh God, that's a hard one. Just so many things. I learned that, I think I have one life to live, which is one of my favorite soap operas, One Life to Live. But I have one life to live, and I can't do something that doesn't make me happy from day to day. Writing, I'm so much more excited about writing. I love teaching math, but like writing is like, super excited, like the most excited I can be. And I just realized like I need to like really, it's not going to happen one day. I just turned 51. I'm not happy about it. And it's like, it's not going to be one day. I need to do it now because I only have so much time. It's like at this age, it's really upsetting that I'm seeing my peers like starting to pass away. And, life is finite. I need to like pursue something that really brings me joy on so many levels. And that's it. So, and then the third thing, and this kind of goes along with it. Like I had a, kind of very negative experience the last 2 years with a really difficult divorce and situation. And I just really decided, I'm really pro therapy. I also have a degree in psychology, that I really need to shed the negativity out of my life. People who bring me down, situations, whatever that does, even like things. When I left with my husband, I just gave away all my knickknacks. And like, I'm really into decorating all these great knickknacks. I'm just sick of them. Like, I just need to like shed things that don't make me happy and focus on what does. And I really have done a lot of soul searching to identify what that is and know where to channel my energy. So those are the three things, that I think are going to help me in the future to move in a positive direction.
I can certainly appreciate that soul searching you mentioned, that trying to make a change, because we do get to a point in our life where you realize things that have served you in the past and were great no longer serve you. And it's hard to say goodbye to physical objects or even beliefs that you have. And I'm curious to know if you feel like you had anything that was taught to you as a child growing up that as you've grown up, you realize really is a limiting belief, and that you don't want to keep that in your life any longer.
Yeah, I made notes, so sorry, I'm flipping through them a little bit. But yeah, this was like a great, like these questions, just so thought provoking. One thing, and I am an academic advisor. I went to college for 12 years after I quit architecture school, and long story there, but it's like, I'm very pro college, so don't get me wrong, but I've come to realize you don't necessarily need to go to college to be a successful, happy person. And in saying that, of course, in some realms you do, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be an architect and engineer. Yes, you do need to go to college. But like, I've met a lot of tradespeople. I was friendly with a mechanic, and he didn't even graduate college. He makes a very great living. He was trained as a mechanic. He didn't even graduate high school, but he has this wonderful, solid, successful career doing something valuable that people need and want. And in any economy, he's going to have a living. So I learned that like, you don't necessarily need to be, down a certain path to find success and happiness. And that's something that it took me a while to realize, but the more people I talk to, and I really talk to a lot of people about their jobs, I'm just really interested and like, what do you do? What do you need to do this job? And now that I'm an academic advisor, and it's just, something that I've just come to really realize. And then the other thing too is like, I grew up in a society in Metro Detroit where there's a very wealthy areas. And, not that my family was wealthy, but the people that I grew up around, a lot of people measure success, that the success and money are equivalent, that to be successful means you make a lot of money. And I kind of rejected that, or learned from a young age. That's not true. To me, I define success by finding whatever it is that makes you happy and actually like self-actualizing. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I learned it in every psych class. I'm sure everybody has, self-actualizing. What is it you're meant to do? And then the other thing, and I don't want to get into any sort of religious debate, but I have really learned that you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the religion or culture you were born into, that you can explore other ways of thinking and being. You don't have to necessarily go down the path that everyone expects for you. And that's kind of what my book is about a lot, is about following your heart and not doing what people are trying to force you to do. And then the fourth thing I listed just real quick, and this is something that my mother always raised me with, this sentiment that you are nobody till somebody loves you. That a single woman, that there must be something wrong with her if she doesn't have a boyfriend or girlfriend or a significant other, you know? And then I finally learned, like, no, it's more important I love myself than somebody else loves me. And I'm just like working really hard to do that. I'm not all the way there, but I'm trying. So
I love that. And it sounds like your book, writing your book was probably the first step in that direction, into pouring into your own cup, into really focusing on what you want, loving yourself, nurturing your soul and your mind and your body, and spending the time doing the things that you want to do. So I really applaud that for you.
thank you.
What would you say as someone who has, well, who's on the journey, like you said, because I think we're all on the journey, just the different points of it. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling with basically deciding that loving themselves, and that sitting down to write that book, for example, is, what they should do versus what society is telling them that they should do?
Yeah, it's so hard, you know. It's so hard to make a decision when you're 18 or younger and you have to decide a career path. That's really challenging. And, you know, you don't know anything at that time, and you might think things and like, yes, I wrote down a couple things, you know. One thing I really suggest to people is try before you buy. Okay. Try
Mm.
to get any sort of experience in any path that you are considering before you invest in it. So, you know, like right now, I advise education students, especially elementary and early childhood. And I'm like, have you ever worked with students of that age? Do you like students of that age? You know, 'cause like one time I was working at this summer camp and I had, you know, 22nd graders that were all running into the bushes naked and like, you know, they were everywhere. And I'm like, this is not for me, you know, at all. So I highly recommend, you know, getting some, you know, experience. And then also talk to as many people as you can. So there was a point in time I lived in Chicago and I was a programmer and I was not happy doing it. And I decided I wanted to go to law school. I was a big John Grisham fan, really into legal thrillers. And I just was like, you know, I want to be a lawyer. And I started going to all these open houses of all the law schools. And I met this lady outside because I was a big smoker in the day, you know, chain smoker pretty much. Haven't smoked in 10 years, but I was a chain smoker. And I met this lady and she was like a 30-year veteran lawyer smoking with the raspy voice. And she's like, don't do it. And she like, we talked for like, her son was there for the open house. We talked for over an hour. I skipped the open house, talked to her. She totally talked me out of it. She's like, this is not for you. And, you know, because she got to know me a little bit, she's like, this is not your personality. And like everyone I knew told me that. So really talk to people to get a sense of what that career or choice is like. And then another thing that I'm trying to do as an author, I never had a lot of information. I was extremely interested in architecture since the age of 5, and I knew no one in the STEM areas. I don't know any engineers, any architects, nobody. And you know, I don't know if I asked my teachers, but I just didn't have information. I didn't have the internet. And so I made a lot of bad choices because it just did not know or have that guidance. Now you have a million resources. You can do personality tests. You can do career assessments. You can find out what you're good at, you know, focus on what you're good at and enjoy. So, you know, really do your homework about what these, you know, fields are like. And then here's a, you know, don't be afraid to bail out if it's not serving you. Case in point, I know somebody who was a reputable surgeon in a particular really hard to achieve discipline. And once this person got all the way through, they said, I hate this. This is awful. This is not for me. After all those years of schooling and training, they went back and redid their internship and residency, and now they do like totally different area of medicine. So even if you've invested, I spent over $150,000 going to college over 12 years. And it happens, but if it doesn't work for you, find what you enjoy. And that's, again, you only have one life to live. And so the other thing, like I said, like really to follow your heart. So in my book, I have two characters whose parents, they're teens. I write young adult, and their parents are pressuring them. My main character is a Broadway bound dancer, super accomplished. She won the coveted teaching spot at her dance studio, and she's the leader of her hip hop crew. But she's also a genius, and her parents are pressuring her because they're biomedical engineers, and they want her to go to their alma mater, which is my alma mater, which is Michigan Tech, to work on the emerging nanobot technologies, because my book is all about nanotechnology. And so they like force her to go. And that's like the whole inciting incident of the book, is she's rebelling against them, but they like threaten not to pay for stuff. So she has to go. And then they get kidnapped and a bunch of other things happen. And then the other character that's like, a secondary character, he is the son of the leader of the Rebel Demons, which is this violent outlaw motorcycle club in Metro Detroit and all over Michigan. And his whole life, he's been groomed to become the VP of this outlaw motorcycle club that runs all the guns and drugs in Metro Detroit. And he just does not want to. And meanwhile, he saved his grandfather's snake because his grandfather got senile and forgot to feed the snake. So his nickname is Snake. And he decides he wants to be a reptile veterinarian. But his dad made him quit school, and he can't, you don't say no to the Rebel Demons, they'll kill you, but he wants to be a veterinarian. And so I have these two characters that are living under what in real life a lot of people do, where they feel this pressure to do something they don't want to do. But it's hard sometimes to go against everything and have the courage to move in a different direction, even if it means sacrificing time and money, and even if you're not sure if it will work out. So that's, what I would say. I kind of go off on tangents, but you got to follow your heart and do what you love, even if it does not please everybody around you, because you have your life to live and it's your life. So
Absolutely. And, that to a large degree is what inspired Louisa and I to create this podcast in the first place, that we both felt we were pressured into following a certain path. And then in the end, it did not work out for us. And we really needed to take that step back and determine what our passions were and what we really wanted to do with our life. So we are 100% on board with your message there. Love that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I when you told me your story, I just was like, good for you guys, because that's awesome too, that you're, I always feel so inspired when I see art. I love artists and people who are just following their passions. Even if they may fail, it's okay. At least you tried. Right.
Exactly.
So that's what's important.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. I love that you wrote a book for young people with that message, right? Because it's really important to get that message out there for people as young as possible, in my opinion. But I think it can be really hard to speak to young adults and to children and say, just follow your heart. That's really hard to just have them receive that. So I love that you've done that in a story that is probably very relatable for young adults these days. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I really read a lot about what agents want to see in young adults and what topics. And I really thought about what is going to resonate with young readers. And one of my purposes in what I write is I want to inform and entertain and educate young people about the STEM areas, because we desperately need kids majoring in STEM areas, and they are not. There's been a decline. We actually are not the leaders in innovation anymore because of this. So that's another message. But so I looked at what agents want, and I tried to have a lot of characters from different cultures. And then I also have a lot of LGBTQ plus issues and situations and characters, because I just really wanted to show conflict, and then another main conflict I have in my book, because conflict drives a story, is my one character has to infiltrate this gang, and she is an animal rights activist, and she's Jewish, and a lot of them wear swastikas and they hunt all the time, and she has to like not only fit in but compete against every biker girl in town who are all trying to get to be the old lady of the leader of the gang. She needs to infiltrate the gang because she needs to save her sister who's been kidnapped and forced to play this awful deadly game. So it's like I just like tried to think of the like biggest conflict I possibly could, and like how she's going to resolve that situation, to be confronted with people who wear swastikas and she's Jewish, but she needs to fit in to save her sister. So she has like a lot of really, really difficult decisions to make, you know, to kind of put aside what she really feels to do something for the betterment of, you know, her sister's life. So
I'm really impressed, Jennifer, how much of your own experience and your own internal conflicts you're able to build into this story. And I know a lot of it is fiction, but it seems like some of it is rooted in your own experience. And I'm curious to know, was there a story in your life that something happened that really changed your life, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, and this is something that, you know, so yeah, something happened to my family, to my mother, really, and it's very hard for me to talk about, but I really want to talk about it because I don't know what to do about it. So 10 years ago, last month, my mother, who was very ill, she, you know, my whole life, she had a lot of heart issues and things, but she was convinced to have an open heart surgery. And we didn't know until after. She should have never had that surgery. She was a terrible candidate. It was never going to be a good outcome. But the other thing they didn't tell us is that during open heart surgery, something that we were not informed, we did not know, is that when they put your heart on the heart lung machine to like breathe for you and, you know, pump your heart, the plaque in your heart can like shoot to anywhere in your body. And so my mom's like plaque all shot to her brain. And they said she had what's called a shower of strokes. So my mom had this awful surgery that basically rendered her the intelligence of a 1-year-old. My mom was a genius. She was one of the first women in the IT department at Chrysler. She wrote some of their original software. And in the course of this awful surgery, she was like blind. She didn't know what a phone was. She was just like totally needed 24-hour care suddenly. It was the worst situation. And so we put her into 2 highly recommended, reputable stroke rehab / assisted living facilities. And they both abused and neglected her like so severely that she died. And so like when this happened, I met this nurse there, and this is just the most memorable thing of it. There was a nurse in the waiting room that I was friendly with because she was there over somebody and I was there with my mom. And she said that when her mother was really ill and she was in one of these facilities, she like completely quit her job to oversee her mother's care because she knows of the abuse and neglect that takes place in these places. And so we reached out to many lawyers, and they all told us point blank, there is no money in elder abuse. The case is too medically complicated. No one would touch it. And so here's the thing that this upsets me. And then I'll tell you, this is what I learned. In the state of Florida, where I lived at the time, the ratio of nurse to patients is outrageously ridiculous. They require 1 RN, that's a nurse with a bachelor's degree, a 4-year education, and 1 to 2 minimally trained CNAs for 40 patients. So that ratio is what killed my mother. And so last night I looked it up because I haven't looked at the statistics in a while. That was 2015. In 10 years, that ratio has not improved. And so I started looking up other states. In Texas, Colorado has no rule about this. Texas, the ratio is 1 to 8. That's 1 nurse to 8 patients. New York, 1 to 15. But the shocking thing is at least 70% of the states in this country have no regulation at all. That means it could be one nurse for 100 patients, and these private companies who get rich off of patients and all their Medicare and whatnot, one overwhelmed nurse and a couple helpers, that is not enough. And so by the time we got my mom into the third hospital, which was great, it's Kindred Hospital, I want to give them credit. They took excellent care of her, but she was too far gone and she died. And this let me know that I don't know anything about politics. I don't follow it. I'm not into that. I don't know much about legal stuff except for what I read in John Grisham books. I don't know how to change these laws, but I can do something through my writing to tell my mom's story. And that's what I learned. That's like, I view my life as the time before she died and after. My perspective of everything I've ever known has changed with what happened to her. And then a similar story with my ex-father-in-law. We do not take care of our elderly in this country. We don't give them enough support. And as we speak, people are being abused and neglected by these institutions, these facilities that their families put them in, and they don't know what else to do with them, and then they die. And it's just a horrible thing that I don't know if a lot of people know about. I found out the hard way, and I lost my mother, who was my best friend. So sorry, it's hard, it's really tough because it's just, I wanted to tell this story for so long. It should not have happened. She should not have died with such indignity because in these places, I called the doctor at the first place and he said, if you don't like the way we're treating her, take her out of here. And I called 911 and I got her out of there. These places are still in business today, 10 years later, these reputable facilities. It's ridiculous. So that really changed me for the worse in some ways, but maybe for the better, because it's like maybe my purpose is to write about this. And so these laws can change, that we have more acceptable ratios where patients are actually getting the care that they need and their families are not held hostage. My mom, and we were glad she died when she did because she was running out of insurance and she needed 24-hour care. And we're like, if she didn't die, like we didn't know what we were going to do. We couldn't afford 24-hour care for her because of a surgery she should have never had in the first place. And so 3 facilities profited off of my mother and treating her like crap. It was just the worst thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And this happened in the United States in 2015. She died on March 25th. And it's just not right that this happened. I'm sorry. It's not right that this is happening right now. And something needs to be done.
Yeah, it's obviously something, rightfully so, that's very impactful. And I know it's hard for you. We can see how much emotionally, it still impacts you. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that in this space with us, because it is people like you who begin to, enact, like, who force change to happen. When you have the courage to put the message out there and to be a voice for these situations that should not be happening, and where there should be more, monitoring and better care and more focus on humans versus business. It is that is where we're going to start to see the change. So thank you for speaking up and for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Of course. And as we begin to wrap up, because you've shared something very very impactful for you in your life, and there are people, in my own experience, I know that, and for a lot of our guests too that we have on the Flying Upstream podcast, I know that it takes, a big change for us to change the trajectory of our own lives. In your case, it was to write your book and to get out here and deliver this message of what's not happening that should be happening in terms of the way we treat our elder. What would you say to someone, maybe a young adult who is stuck in a position or in a mentality that really drains them, but they're really afraid to take that leap of faith? What would you say to them, as we wrap up, as the last question that we'll ask you today, to
Yeah.
change their lives?
Yeah, I've dealt with someone and counseled them for a long time, and they were just so afraid to try anything else, but they hated their job with a passion, but they were like terrified that if they tried something else, they wouldn't like it either. And I just say, you know what? I know so many people who are so educated and they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, they're still searching. I've actually had students that were in their 70s and 80s, they're still searching. If you try something and you just don't find it, try something else. There's a million different options. Talk to people. Don't let anything limit you. Be a problem solver. If somebody tells you no, figure out a different way to do it. And I'm not all the way there yet, but I'm just happy that I'm trying to move in a positive direction and stay positive and focus on what's important. So thank you all so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Jennifer, you've been amazing, and you are living proof that reinvention isn't just possible, it's powerful. Thank you for reminding us that we're never too old, too late, or too far off course to find what fits.
And to our viewers and listeners, if you want to check out Jennifer's book, we've put the link in the chat, and it'll also be in the show notes and in the YouTube description so that you can connect with her, pick up a copy of her book. And if this episode lit a fire under you, share it with a friend who needs a nudge to keep flying upstream. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and of course, keep flying.